not an economist, but still stay high.
I think this is actually really interesting.
I get dizzy thinking about all the different name changes and PPAs out there.
Yeah.
So first, we've got Chris Collins, the CEO of Ohm Analytics. They're a data platform that helps track solar installation trends across the US. He's going to help us dive into the numbers. We also have James Lee, the VP of Sales at Everbright. They're a really fast-growing entrant in the solar financing game, offering solar loans, PPAs, and leases. And then finally, we've got Matt Marks, the VP of Sales at SunnyMac. They're a leading solar installer serving the Mid-Atlantic region. So for those in the audience, if you want to get in touch with the panelists or myself, we're going to post their LinkedIn accounts in the chat box below. So feel free to reach out to them, especially if questions about those particular areas that I just mentioned. Now, if you do have questions for the panelists that you want answered in the panel today, just type that into the Q&A box, and we're going to make sure we can get those answered. We actually had a good number of questions being asked during the registration process, so we're going to sprinkle those in as well. So before we dive in, I want to just kind of ask the audience a somewhat provocative question here. We're going to bring up a poll. And so the poll is, which current trend would you bet the success of your solar company on next year? We got the poll going. Yep, there it is. Is it PPAs and leases? Option 2, investing in operations. 3, selling home electrification, diversifying in that case. Or 4th, the death of bad actors. What I'm referring to there are all the bankruptcies of the players that you really don't want in the solar industry. So we're gonna let a few folks here answer the question. Hey, Matt, what do you even think of this question?
You go with whichever one you want on the day of the week. It's like changing weather. I'd split them up at quarters, but it is what it is.
Cool. All right. We are now going to end the poll and share the results. So it looks like, Matt, looks like you're right. It's a pretty even split across these three, from 30% PPAs, leases, investing operations, selling home electrification. And surprisingly, the death of bad actors is only that came in last. So, all right, we're going to now go in and see what our panelists have to say about these options themselves. We're going to organize the conversation into 3 parts. The first is, how is the market different today than it was just like a year ago? And then second, how are installers adapting to this change? And then third, at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. So remember, if you do have questions for the audience, definitely put them into the Q&A box and we'll get to them. So first off, all of us, we're pretty much here because interest rates, the Fed's bumped up the interest rates to kind of their record levels, and that's negatively impacted new sales. So James, let me kick this off with you. How do we get into this mess?
I think, just kind of backing up a little bit, we've experienced historically low interest rates, right, over the past 4 to 5 years prior to this past year. And when you really look at where the Federal Reserve rate, which really drives kind of lending and monetary policy, was throughout the past 20 years, where we are today is not significantly off historically of where the economy was prior to the Great Recession, right, of 2008 to 2010. So when you think about how do we get into this mess, in reality, it's, how are we correcting the mess that happened because of historically low interest rates? To think that interest rates would stay near a 0% or 1% or 2% cliff, or for many of you who might have, 30-year mortgages at 3% or under, I think is, us falling on false assumptions and false hope of what interest rates should be, right, to build a very healthy economy across all markets in this country. So, I think a lot of the kind of quick reactions are due to a lot of different factors, right? Some of it is driven by rising costs, right, related to inflation. Some of it is driven through economic factors, in addition to interest rates that don't typically influence, right, monetary policy. Some of it is driven by political factors. And I think where we're looking at today is, there's a lot of uneasiness, right, as a consumer, or as, us ourselves being consumers, of where the market is going relative to how the solar industry has taken a turn within the financing space, versus, right, where kind of that healthy level should be. So to say that, we started off as historic low interest rates. We had these great times where interest rates were very low, or, dealer fees associated with solar loans and solar retail installment contracts was historically low. And to have that quick turn, I think that's the painful point, is that there was such a huge change over the past 12 months. And that's really being impacted and felt through by all stakeholders within the residential solar space.
Yeah.
The second piece is the lack of availability of capital in the market. So when interest rates get higher, what happens? Credit starts to, contract, right? And the availability of credit, availability of capital starts to get squeezed. And when there's less money in the market, it's not just an aspect of the cost of capital, but it's the availability of capital. So you have a lot of financiers, and you can go on Google and read about some of the bad, bankruptcies and companies going out of business that, really caused a big dent within the financing space. Those all contribute to, risk, right? And having to consider, do I continue with my policies, business processes that enable this super high growth trajectory, or do I have to start thinking about how to make sure I'm layering in risk and sharing part of that as part of, it's a combination of all of the above. It's just not related to, how did we get here?
So it's the increasing cost of capital, but also the availability. And so that's kind of played out. So Chris, let me turn this over to you. So I think I just saw like the latest report that you sent out just earlier this morning. I think overall Ohm's reporting about a 10% contraction in the resi solar market this year compared to the last. Can you break that data apart a bit? Which markets are severely down, which ones are the bright spots?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just released it this morning. There's a ton of data in there, so I could talk for an hour, but I'll try to keep it super brief. But yeah, actually, we've been looking at the market outside of California, and in August it was down 20%. There was a bit of a trough in September of 12%. So yeah, still very slow, and we'll see what October shakes out of. It's still very slow. A lot of divergence across states. So California is kind of its own market, and we can talk about California, but in general, Northeast states with high energy costs are doing much better than Florida and Texas. So like Texas was down, I think, almost 50% year over year in September. So sorry, Scott, but I know you guys are there. But,
being in Austin, that hurts.
But there was just a huge run up in Texas last year, and I think that some of those states are feeling more pain. And California is its own market with a lot of backlog. But I think we're looking at proposals, and in California, proposal activity on NEM 3.0 is still down somewhere between 75 and 80%. So I can go in a lot more detail, but those are the highlights.
Okay, what about the so the bright spots are just like in the Northeast? What about the Mid-Atlantic?
Yeah, I think the Northeast and other like states with high energy costs. So Illinois is still doing well, and Hawaii is in September up 33%. They had a shift in their with their Battery Plus program coming up, so there's been some pull forward there. So I think it's, and Puerto Rico too. So Northeast, Midwest, and a couple other states. But yeah, Southeast, Mid-Atlantic not doing as well.
Okay, got it. So let me ask James real quick. Given your vantage point with looking at doing Everbright sales across the U.S., are there any particular markets that surprised you the most this year or in the past couple quarters?
I mean, I think it follows in the trends that Chris is talking about in terms of kind of, what happened in certain, so California, for example, post NEM 3.0, I think a lot of Texas, kind of their contraction was driven by, cost of retail energy rates in Texas has decreased, right, since the COVID days, and it,
Oh,
it
so yeah, not
impacted
just COVID
savings.
day. It was the big winter storm that drove up
Yeah,
all those prices. So that's come down since then. Mhm.
yeah, but as Chris mentioned, there's emerging markets, right, that are popping up, and some historically what people would view as your non-solar states, right, are starting to now get some penetration, with installers going in and sales dealers going in, and really trying to pitch and promote residential solar in certain states as well. So I think what we all can agree upon is utility rates are continuing to increase, right? So there's that cliff to where at a certain point it starts making sense, right, to think about putting residential solar on your home.
James, so kind of clarification, those non-solar states that you just are referring to, can you name one or two of those?
Yeah, I think as kind of Chris mentioned here, I mean, Illinois, I wouldn't say is a non-solar state, but was not mainly targeted, right, as a potential huge growth state for a lot of different markets. Different states that are popping up on people's radars are like Michigan. I think
Okay.
people tend to not talk about Michigan a lot. A lot of conversation around Missouri, Kansas. Ohio is another great state. A lot of it is also being driven by IRA, right? And the fact that there's additional, ITC benefits based on certain IRA kickers or adders that are available in certain
Okay.
communities, which are in a lot of these states that I mentioned that are eligible for that additional ITC.
Okay. We're gonna get more into the IRA later in the conversation. So Matt, you're in the Mid-Atlantic, you're in Delaware, that region. How has this year been relative to previous years for you?
I mean, this year started out a really good growth year. I would say it is stayed flat. It ebbs and flows, but it follows that trend. I mean, we'll be above where we were last year.
Mhm.
Thankfully, I get to say that. But much like James and Chris were talking about, I have the benefit of where we sell in Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, and PA. We have pretty substantial increase in utility rates. So
Mhm.
we have that common enemy that others don't get the benefit from. So that it's a nice spot to be in for that.
Yeah, so I want to try to switch gears a little and talk about those, what companies are doing to adjust to the current environment. Matt, I'll stick with you here. You told me that you used to sell a lot of solar loans, but that's now shifted more to PPAs and leases more recently. So what was the hardest part of that shift?
I'd look at it from two different ways. The first way is from a sales perspective, and that's just education. I mean, for us, being such a heavy loan market, emphasis on what we can present to a customer, what we can offer to them, more or less what how it benefits them as well. That's one of the things. Loan to me is a linear equation. It pencils in or it pencils out. But a PPA, it can get a little bit more extensive as in looking at the bill, looking at their solar availability, really getting into that. We from an operations standpoint, they're pretty equal for us. We kind of both have to hold them to the same standard from an install standpoint to closing a job out. I mean, they're all the same for us at that point. So we really rely a lot on that first piece of that educational aspect to our sales teams.
Okay. Cool. So let me follow up. Either James or Matt, you can answer this question, but has that shift from loans to PPAs or leases, has that changed either yours or your customers? When I say James, maybe either change yours, Matt's, Sunny Max, or James, your customers. Are y'all targeting different customers? Are the customer profiles any different between when you're selling loans to when now you're selling PPAs and leases?
Matt, you
I'm
want to
happy.
take
I'm
this?
happy to answer that. Yeah. In terms of target, no. It might make us spread out a little bit more, but for us, I mean, it really is. I mean, just because we still offer both of them. I mean, it comes down to what the customer wants at the end of the day, and how you present the different options. The ability to have, good financing partners separates yourself from other sales orgs, other EPCs. So having good financing partners lets you show a customer what makes it better for them. But in terms of what we target, that hasn't shifted for us. It really hasn't. If anything, it's brought us back, to home base.
James, what are you seeing with your customers?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it changes the target or profile of consumers, right? For, each respective solar contractor installer out there. But I want to emphasize what Matt mentioned. It's about educating the homeowner, right? I think when you think about the profile of the homeowner, a product's going to make sense based on their situation, their needs, their economic, right, profile and situation. And ultimately, at the end of the day, right, like, from everybody's standpoint, we're agnostic, right? Whether you offer a loan or a PPA or a lease, we want the best option for the homeowner that makes the most sense based on their specific needs. And I think where you're seeing a huge shift from loans to leases is because going back to the financial state of that consumer and where financial interest rates are today, solar has evolved into this very heavy monthly payment sale, right? Over the past, I would say 4 to 5 years, 6 years to really when solar loans started taking off. If you look at where interest rates are today and where a PPA payment is today based on the kilowatt hour rate you're selling the homeowner, it's either equal or the PPA rate can be lower depending on whether the homeowner can claim the full ITC or not. So with that field being leveled off, now it's a ball game of, you're no longer saying you can pay X dollars a month less by going with the solar own. You're saying payments might be pretty much equal, but here are the benefits you get from a PPA lease, and here's what you need to do if you go with a loan. So the story's changed a little bit, the education's changed a little bit, and the economic deltas between the financing options is ultimately gone.
Okay, got it. So that's interesting. So Steve asked a question here, and we're going to answer that. So maybe this is for you first, Matt. What percentage of your book of business has shifted from loans to PPAs, leases this year? Can you?
Yeah, I mean, they've probably almost flipped. I would say prior to this year, or even prior to the last 2 quarters, it was probably 75% loan, and now it's split to almost a 50-50 break for us. Obviously you have cash sprinkled in there as well, but for us that's a small percentage. So I'd much rather look at those 2 greater scales between loan and lease. So for us, it is turned 180 degrees.
Okay.
John, I have some interesting data on that too, if you want me to show just what we're seeing in different markets. I think what Matt said lines up with what we're seeing. So we track it in a few different few key markets that we just presented here. And you can see like Arizona, which was 10% loan or lease or PPA, is now at 26. And in states in the Northeast, it's even more dramatic. Like, what Matt's describing in New Jersey is 30%. It's almost flipped to 70%. So we're seeing that in the data for sure. And California hasn't. There's a public data set in California, and it's not quite showing up in that. But I think when I talk to installers, I've talked to a number of installers in California where almost big percentage of their NEM 3.0 sales are now leases. So they kind of like flipped, like what Matt said. So anyways, thought that data would be helpful.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. That's really helpful, Chris. So now going to Garrett Smith question here. And this is for you, Matt. What do you guys look for in a great finance partner?
So
other than a good face.
That's it. I mean, everything we do really revolves around partnership. We look for, and it's really not just to financing. Obviously, it's a big portion of what we look for, but the ability to kind of grow on a parallel level. I want someone that can set high goals for us, as well as give us the ability to chase those.
For the audience, who's your finance partner right now?
Our main financing partners are Sonova and Goodleap.
Okay, go for it. All right.
Yep. Yeah. So for us, it's kind of working on that same goal. That we can have the ability to present different pricing options to a customer. I mean, there's plenty of people in our region that don't have accessibility to TPO products. So, the fact that we can offer that is great, as well as other people. But just having that at a price point that, like James said, it lets people get back to that beating the bill, which I'm not a huge fan of that analogy. I'd much rather see what the customer needs. But it does give you that ability from day one in our markets. So that's important for us. The next step is communication. And then lastly, it's transparency on what we can offer to a customer. The one thing about a third party owned product that I really enjoy is that they're going to win when we install well. That it's going to produce power, that they're going to have the accessibility, and then the stringent requirements on what's necessary to close the job out. We don't get paid until it's done right. I really like being held to that standard.
Okay, that's great. So Steve has a follow-up question. So maybe James, if you can answer kind of the combination of those two questions. His question is to follow up on that. How has that affected time to PTO? Is there a correlation from the shift on an operations ability to get to PTO? And I mean, because now you're getting paid at the end, where some of the loan solar loan partners were actually able to pay early on.
Yeah, the easy answer is it shouldn't, right? Whether you're installing a PPA or installing a loan, it's still, construction of a solar system and interconnecting it. And, hopefully the processes should be similar, even though the requirements to fund might be different. What we're seeing on our end is that there's not significant delta per se between interconnection timelines from a financing standpoint between a loan and a PPA, right? I think there are additional requirements, for a PPA during the funding process, right, related to system photos. And, Matt can probably spend half an hour to an hour talking about all those requirements. But, ultimately, if you think about your business and scaling and standardizing and creating great processes to maximize cash flow and profitability, you should be building a singular process for every single one of your projects to look the same. And if you can focus on that, then all of these shifts from loan to PPA back to loan to who knows what other product may come out down the line, in 2, 3, 5 years, it's all going to look the same, right? Yeah. I think financing is a vehicle to allow you to sell a job, construct it, get it interconnected, and help you build a business in which you can be profitable. It shouldn't be the driver as to whether you do your projects one way or another.
Yeah, got it. So Chris, let me turn over to you, because speaking about selling one project or different types of products and such, have you seen any major change in what installers are selling this year versus the last few years?
In terms of financing products or
not just financing products. We know we just talked about that, but other kind of add-on products, either batteries, but are they going, I've talked to a lot of installers who are like, we're doing more EV chargers. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the various products and attachment rates that you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think the storage is the biggest thing, right? Especially the biggest ticket too. Like EV charger, it might be $1,000 or something, but storage is a big ticket. And we think the storage market will double next year, mainly through California. And California attachment rates have gone from 10% last year to now with NEM 3.0, 85, which is what you see in Hawaii or other markets. So that's been the biggest thing that we've seen. And anecdotally, there's a lot of retrofit opportunities. I'm in Vermont, and our family is getting a battery added through a VPP program. So there's a lot of exciting utility programs, and I think we'll see more of that.
Okay, cool, great, appreciate that, Chris. So a couple more. I just want to add on here. So we talked about PPAs a lot, about different products, but what about operationally? Matt, what's Sunny Mac focusing on now operationally that's different from that period of high growth that you had a few years ago?
Yeah, I mean, we had to focus on ourselves. We couldn't be good partners to our customers, to our sales teams, to our financiers, to our manufacturing firms that work with us, if we didn't kind of go back and look what we could be better with. As everyone's kind of alluded, the cost of capital is going up. You have to do more with less sometimes. In order to do that, you have to be efficient. with that. I'd be mistaken if I didn't say that, we have looked at other markets. We've tested out other markets, and we've kind of had to bring it back home because we just had to be better with what we had. The answer isn't always to go chasing that shiny star. Sometimes you can do with what you got. So, for us, we went back and kind of broke each department down with just quantitative goals, whether it be days in status or amount of touches to a customer, which kind of brought us to you, or just a general quantitative data on how many touch points to a customer. But all of it, we all win at the end of the day, from all those customer, sales partners, financiers, it's all good for us at the end of the day. But it's something that we had to really get stretched out and recognize for us to bring it back home a little bit more. So I spent a lot of time daily, and our team spends a lot of time just on how we can get better with what we have and expand when we need to expand.
So James, what do you think? What about your customers? What are your successful customers doing differently to adapt compared to the ones that are struggling more?
There's a couple things, right? I think there's a little bit of level setting going on and kind of looking into the business. Sometimes when you're running at such a high speed, you're not looking at what's going on in all aspects of your business, right? And you're just trying to, play whack-a-mole, right? As sales continue to grow, installs continue to happen. You're doing a ton of jobs. People are excited, but there's gaps, right? Whether it's process related or some other gaps that potentially you don't start to see until things get tough. And I think, a lot of our great customers are really looking internally, right? Whether it's operational based, do they have the right systems? Do they have the right processes to really enable things to be done more streamlined and efficient? That ultimately leads towards profitability. That's the ultimate goal, right? Of hopefully everyone on this call.
Talk about that more, James. I mean, businesses are different or generally run differently in periods of high growth versus the current period, which is stagnant. Can you talk more about what makes that work now versus before?
I don't think it's what makes it worth more now. I think people didn't pay as much attention when things are going well, right? Like they obviously every business owner cares about their business and the mechanisms to their business, whether it's the sales engine or the operations engine or general business type of processes. But when things get hard, when M1 payments get taken away, when cost of capital increases, when you can't get that extra credit line for your business that you needed before, when distributors are taking down your credit limits on your equipment procurement credit lines, it impacts your business to a way that you might not have seen before because jobs are just cycling quickly. And when you really think about what's the ultimate way to measure a business's health, everyone's answer should be profitability and margin, right? And the question I would ask, maybe Matt, is just from a hypothetical or from an installer point of view is, I think a lot of people got, the shiny object for them was all this upfront cash flow that kept coming in, and people thought that, seeing cash come into their bank accounts was this huge kind of growth and my business is doing well. But at the same time, they weren't creating their margins or pricing their EPCs to a certain point to where they were actually being profitable on these jobs, which has caused a lot of impacts to these installers that are either struggling very mightily right now or have gone out of business because they did not price it in this high growth period.
Okay, cool. Appreciate that. Thanks. So I want to start looking ahead now to 2024. And so before that, we'd go deep into that. I want to do some quick rapid fire fill in the blank questions to try to get us warmed up. So first question here, interest rates next year will blank. Matt?
Raise.
Chris?
Not an economist, but still stay high.
James?
Go up.
All right, there you have it. Okay, one more question here. Rapid fire. The trend I am betting the success of my company on in 2024 is, Chris?
Continued consumer demand. Long-term healthy outlook for solar.
All right, Matt?
Education and outreach.
And James?
strong, authentic partnerships.
Cool. All right. So let's dive into that a little bit more. I mean, so James, you just mentioned strong, authentic partnerships. Can you give an example of one that is not typical, but is really good?
So, Matt alluded to, what are one of the important things you look in a finance year? He said partnerships is number one, right? And I think that's super important, right? As we think about kind of tough times, right? Who are you partnered with? And this goes in every single kind of, partnership that you might have as a business, whether it's a sales organization, whether it's a distributor, a financier, subcontractor, whatever it is. You know, the people who are aligned with you and your business interests and what you're trying to achieve in your goals will typically be helpful in helping you achieve those goals and succeeding, right? The people who are not aligned to only get the job done for you, in the long run, it probably doesn't end up as well as you had hoped.
So let me play devil's advocate here, or at least critique that comment. So I'd say partners, there's a good example. There's tons of examples out there where a potential partner would say, sure, yes, we're completely aligned with what your goals and everything. At least that's what's being said. And so it's like kind of a yes man type of thing. How are y'all able to decipher if that's genuine or not? Maybe Matt, can you describe that at all? Your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that it is part of my job as I look for new sales teams or we'll call them channel partners, is kind of fighting through all that smoke on what they can say. My first question that always kind of draws a red flag for me is before a conversation starts is, what's the red line? Before any conversation kind of comes on, instead of, hey, what do you have? What do you offer? What can we give to our customers? It's extremely important for me that much like James alluded to, that we have the same goals in mind. You have to sort through it. Have I missed on some? Yeah, I've missed on some. But the ones I've hit on have been really great. There's no quick solution for me other than just, knowing who I am and knowing what I want to do for a company that I work for, and just getting to know that individual. I'm not afraid to get rid of an individual, if they're not presenting what's best for us or best for them and best for the customer. So you have to have a quick handle on that, as well as really spend a lot of time on the front end to negotiate and get someone on our team.
Anything to add there, James?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that you can do, right, to kind of ensure that there's, mutual interest and alignment is, setting goals, milestones, metrics, key performance indicators, right? Having weekly or bi-weekly syncs to make sure that you're tracking towards those goals that you defined. And, when people start missing out on meetings, this is a typical first sign that, well, again, right, people are busy and they have things that come up. But when you start missing one or two meetings that are built so that you are aligned, right, in your mutual interest and goal, it typically tends towards that maybe someone is not as, aligned or bought into your vision as you need. So, there are different things that you can build from a metrics and KPI standpoint to make sure there's alignment. But, ultimately, as Matt alluded to, right, when the first thing they say is, oh, I could do 100 jobs a month right out of the gate, and you're like, wait a second, right? Like, let's talk first about what are your goal, what are your vision? Does this align with my installer? Not looking for that next quick buck. And building strong partnerships. Not to say that you can't plug holes with some of the quick sales and quick wins, right, as needed to plug some of the gaps and make sure that your labor force is busy. But strong partnerships is what's going to get you through the tough times.
Okay, cool. All right, let's turn to some crystal ball here. Chris, you guys do forecasts. So
yeah.
Bodhi and Ohm's forecast. What does 2024 look like? Which markets look promising, which don't? How is that different than what you're seeing today? Or anything, any particular states or markets that are like, oh, everyone should be paying attention to, either good or for bad?
Yeah, so overall, we have a forecast that's down 10% next year. And a lot of that's based on California. So California, I think, will be down in the forecast 30-40%. That's on PV too. I think if you look at it with dollars and storage, it'll be a little bit higher. So there's some optimism there for installers. And I think by state, it's similar. Like the Northeast will probably do better. Texas and Florida, will be comping off worse years. So, they're not going to have severe declines like they did this year. But, the Northeast and those higher energy cost markets will probably be in better shape for next year.
What's it look like for Delaware, Maryland, Jersey area that Matt's working in?
Yeah, I think New Jersey's slightly up. I don't know some of those. I don't know Maryland, but yeah, more positive. He's in a good market relative to some other folks. I've also, I've talked to a number of installers that are also looking at in California that are looking at other states, and so that's actually like one of the main use cases of our data is to help with expansion. So I know a lot of people for next year are looking at other states, not being too aggressive, but maybe one or two.
Okay, got it. Cool. All right. So there were actually a number of questions. There's a couple of questions right now about the kind of related around the IRA and impact of that in 2024. So maybe James, will Everbright be able to leverage any of those IRA adders from like domestic content, LMI? How's your company thinking about the IRA adders?
Yeah, the answer is an absolute yes, right? If the government's going to provide incentives, to really push and promote and put, solar panels on rooftops, we are planning to leverage those incentives. As to the how, right? Like, Everbright's really taking a stance that, we want healthy installers and we want homeowners to get a good deal, right? So I know that's a kind of a very general kind of statement, but ultimately at the end of the day, any incentive out there that the government puts forth, right, should be at the benefit of the homeowner. And we want to really make sure that whatever products that we bring to market that is going to be leveraging those incentives really benefits the homeowner, which at the end of the day should enable the sales rep to close more deals, which at the end of the day should bring more jobs to installers to install.
So let me ask this. So I think, the IRA, I think, is still pretty nebulous for most installers. You've got the normal ITC, you've got these adders where the domestic content, you've got the prevailing wage, the energy communities. So how is a financing company thinking about this? Are you guys creating special programs that installer that needs to try to apply into, or is it going to be, hey, here's a product that includes this particular adder, or is it just kind of be all built in and black box that in the end it's just a lower cost product for everybody?
Yeah, so one of the things about Everbright, aside from the fact that we offer financing solutions, is we started off the acquisition of the software platform, the Sighten tool, the old school Sighten tool, and because we are, built foundationally off software, a lot of the things you're talking about, it's going to be all tech driven. So for example, energy communities, you could qualify it via an address. So if you enter an address in our system and it tells you that it's an energy community, it'll automatically qualify for some product that, is attributed to that particular adder. Or if a customer is running their credit and you have a certain credit profile that hopefully aligns with the definition that the DOE puts out for low to middle income qualification, then you're going to know that that homeowner is going to be eligible. So our goal is to ultimately build a tech enabled, right, kind of solution that allows products to be fit to each particular property or homeowner based on what IRA adders that they qualify for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything to add on the IRA, Chris or Matt?
I'd be curious to hear from Matt though. Like when I talk to installers, I don't hear a ton of them like developing strategies around that specifically. So I'd be curious to hear from Matt. See does Sunny Mac have a strategy around that for targeting different consumers?
So as much as I said that before, that we don't really target specific areas, demographics, I mean, it will be something that we're going to have to do. I mean, I was honestly waiting for James's answer to see how financiers are truly going through it. I mean, it's my belief that they're still trying to figure out a lot of things that are exciting, and will inevitably be there. But I agree with James that it'll be technology driven. That if that is the case, I think it will. I think it'll drive teams to market certain areas. That there's so much more benefit for those individuals that maybe weren't as approached, or they can be approached differently. So it will definitely drive or steer some direction for our teams.
Okay, sounds good. So I think kind of sum that up. Installers are waiting for financing companies to give them the answers. All right, we're going to get into our open Q&A session right now. If you do have a question for the panelists, please type it into the Q&A box. If you're typing it into the chat, I'm not going to see them. So please type them into the Q&A box, and we're going to get those answered. So question here from Megan Lucier. She asks, how does a sales rep compensation differ for loans versus third-party ownership? Any difference there, Matt?
No difference for us.
Okay. Thank you very much. Another question. I think this is actually really interesting. Gustavo's asked this twice. Would success look like selling PPAs, leases, and electrification as the foundation for 2024? The key part here is this: he's added electrification, home electrification. How many installers are thinking about adding the product diversification for electrification, home electrification, which includes EV chargers, heat pumps, you name it?
I can add to that. I mean, I've talked to a lot. Some are considering it. It's definitely a different approach. It's not as easy as solar. I mean, selling a heat pump might be a $10,000 ticket, or so they're smaller tickets. So I hear of some that are trying to approach it. I think it's more on battery storage. That's the opportunity. I talked to a lot of people that are going after the retrofit market on that. And we actually have really good data on that. A lot of people are using our data to go after the retrofit market. So yeah, I think a lot of people are thinking about it, but it's not as sexy as solar. It's harder.
That's sexy. Okay, here's a question. How many companies, installation companies, have y'all come across that have changed their name from like Acme Solar, which probably is a real company, so I apologize. Acme Solar to now like Acme Energy or Acme Home Energy and Solar? How many have changed to try to at least do that? How many of you come across, Chris or James?
A few. I mean, I know in California, like there are a few large HVAC, traditional HVAC contractors that actually got into solar, and so I think that's a crossover. I don't see a lot of name changes. The names are already confusing. We deal with that. They're very problematic. So please don't change your name. It'll make our job a lot harder.
Yeah, I get dizzy thinking about all the different name changes and PPAs out there. Yeah. So, but I mean, you're seeing the electrification, piece happening in California, related to NEM and now adding the storage units, right, to all of the solar systems, and seeing a higher adoption rate of storage in California. On Everbright's side, we are heavily pushing towards bundled offerings related to electrification of the home. So we will be launching a bundled offering with an EV charger that's offered with solar in the near future in multiple markets. We're also looking at other energy efficiency, smart panel. Like, again, right, everyone's thinking right now, hey, this thing doesn't pencil, right? And the cost might not make sense for the homeowner. But there will be a time and place where everything does start making sense. And I think, that's where we definitely want to be a little bit more of the front charger, right? The ones kind of pushing adoption into that standpoint, because solar is the mechanism, right, that enabled the home to understand energy production, consumption, hopefully at the end of the day, savings, right, for that consumer. But when you think about the home, there's so many more aspects related to energy that can make that home more efficient, to where the homeowner is having a greater value, right, to the home, aside from just adding solar panels.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because I mean, back in the days, I mean, solar was always kind of the gateway. And now, and then when interest rates were low, you can kind of bundle batteries, bundle all these, so and you can finance a huge ticket item. But we had a panel at RE Plus, and what Lighthouse Solar has done was actually kind of go backwards. And they thought of it as more of a home energy roadmap. So you, rather than trying to sell a big bundle right up front, you're breaking it down so that you're thinking about multiple sales to the same customer, where the cost of customer acquisition after that first sale is a lot lower. And now you're thinking about lifetime customer value more. Is that approach, what do you think about that approach, Matt?
I mean, I love it. Look, at the end of the day, I like simple things. I like knowing that we can put PV on a roof. That would make me sleep pretty easily at night. But in terms of growth, I don't necessarily, as much as I'd love to offer everything to every customer, I also want to make sure that we understand the material. My thought and mindset is more on partnerships with people that do that already. Giving them, whether it be access to capital, or our internal structure, but leaning on what they do well, and at the same time, a possible customer acquisition from a solar standpoint. So capitalizing on what they do really well, and then letting us capitalize on what we do really well, under either the same umbrella, or something there. But that's where I look as a true evolution of what we'll do. I'm sure other people, are going to do the same things, if not already. But I don't look at it as us all turnkey. Tomorrow I'm going to do everything that you want in the home, as much as I'd love to. Every salesperson would love me to do that. I want to find partnerships for people that can do it, so that I can present it to that customer the accurate way.
You guys could, and you could probably potentially even get some a cut of that lead source potentially, right?
Sure. Or let them sell solar. I mean, I think it could really be win-win. I mean, as we've said time and time again, the cost of capital,
Okay.
it's tough. If we're in a good spot, that's a way I'd like to really expand.
Cool. All right, a couple more questions real quick before we kind of wrap it up. Jeff here asks, is the recently released ohm data available for free? Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. For contractors, installers, sales orgs, there's a ton of free data on there. So there's a sign up form on the website. We've got some really cool options, and also there's an opportunity to do data sharing to get a lot more info at no cost. So for installers, so yeah, we've seen a ton of interest in that.
Okay, second, and this is, I think probably a lot of people are asking. It's from Mike Davison. This is for you, James. What qualifies a company to work directly with Everbright?
If you reach out to me directly, we could get into details, but as every other financier, there are requirements in order to be qualified. So I can get into more details in a separate conversation there.
All right, so I think that's going to be it for the questions from the audience. Like, you want to reach out to any of the panelists, we're going to put their LinkedIn accounts in the chat. So right now we've got a few minutes left for the rest of the session. I do have one last question I want to ask each of you. What is one super practical, tactical thing that each person here that's listening in, what can they do? What can they do when they go back and try this in their business? So let's start with you, Matt.
Invest in your CRM. It is the basis that triggers every communication point, whether it be with Bodhi or our sales teams. That is, as much as I'd love to be perfect with it, to me it's a great medium, to reach so many different aspects of what we do, to put it all together.
Great. All right, Chris.
I don't know if this is practical or tactical, but something I think we should all think about is, as the industry goes through this rough period, it's important to stay in the game, right? Because the long term is so positive, so positive. It was a very exciting time over the next 10 years to be in the industry. So stay in the game, focus on profitability, and don't try to do too much at once.
And James, what about you?
I got a few, but if I had to say one, so I'm going to go off of this kind of notion of strong, authentic partnerships, right? So I would just itemize anyone and everyone you work with, right? Whether it's a sales partner, subcontractors, CRMs, right? Vendors, and just kind of itemize everyone and just kind of do a quick exercise is, whether you understand, is that a required partner for my business to succeed, or is this a partner that is just part of the day-to-day operations? And if you do have partners or relationships, or it could be a software subscription that is very, very instrumental to the success of your business, probably think about how you can create a stronger partnership with them. Stronger partnership is just not about like, hey, talking to them more deeply, but understanding goals, making sure that you're aligned, making sure that you're aware when changes happen, right? Or, we're in an industry that changes a lot, and ultimately it's important to keep in close communication. In addition, right, those partners could just be, people within the industry in your area, right? You might have seen them as competitors in the past, but in reality, in the next year, they might be your ticket to you staying in business. So, I think it's taking an overall look at kind of, how do I make sure that I have the right partnerships in place, that I'm working with the right people, that I'm surrounding myself with like-minded people who really want to, as Chris alluded to, succeed, thrive, right, in this industry. And when times do get better, and they will, you'll be in a very, very good position then to really leverage that, kind of additional growth period that will come.
Yeah. So to recap, invest in your CRM, build really strong partnerships. And if you do those, among other things, you'll be able to ride out the current market conditions and be there to dominate the market when it does rebound. Is that right? Cool. All right. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. This has been a really awesome conversation. Hopefully you've enjoyed this discussion as much as I did moderating it. I'm also sure the audience has tons more questions if they still want to ask. I think all the panelists' LinkedIn contacts are in the chat window, so please reach out to them. And then finally, I just want to especially thank the audience for joining us today. If you do like this panel, let us know. If you have a particular topic you'd like for us to explore in more detail, send me a note on LinkedIn. And then one final plug here, we did launch Bodhi Free just last month at RE Plus so that installers of all sizes can start delivering amazing customer experiences for free. So check us out at bodhi.solar. So with that, thank you very much and wishing everyone a very, very busy Q4.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Scott.